A gunshot cracked the night. Boone's low growl followed a rumble that made the porch boards tremble under Wyatt Carver's bare feet. He stepped into the moonlight, revolver loose, but ready in his hand. Somewhere beyond the old stone well, a voice, raw, feminine, urgent, cut through the stillness. "Don't let them find me." But that wasn't where the story began. Out here on 80 acres of the Texas Panhandle, the wind had its own voice. It moaned low through mesquite branches and whistled across dry earth, a sound Wyatt had learned to listen to the way other men listened for their names. Words were for folks who still had something to say. His ranch sat on the edge of nowhere, the nearest neighbor 20 miles away, just the way he liked it. Solitude didn't ask questions. It didn't expect him to smile. The cabin, once whitewashed, now stood stripped to sun-bleached planks and peeling memory. Behind it leaned a sagging stable home to midnight, his scarred black Mustang. Boone, his old cattle dog with one blind eye, was the only other heartbeat that shared his land. Mornings were always the same, coffee, blouse, coal, drunk, standing at the window before the sun cracked the horizon. Saddle up, ride the fence line, patch the weak spots, hunt coyotes bold enough to test him. He didn't talk, didn't need to. The work filled the silence better than words ever could. But the nights stretched longer than the land itself. Wyatt would sit on the porch, rifle across his lap, one boot propped on the railing, watching the stars. Sometimes he'd trace them and wonder if they were the same constellations that had shone the night Clara died, the woman he'd meant to marry, the one he'd buried 7 years ago beneath the cottonwood tree. They never found who did it. Some blamed Comanche raiders. Others blamed outlaws. Wyatt no longer cared whose name to pin it on. The hole in his chest stayed the same. That night, Boone's growl had been low, almost curious, but enough to snap Wyatt from the edge of sleep. Midnight shifted in the stable, nostrils flaring. Wyatt stepped off the porch, the cold dirt rough under his feet, moving silent as a shadow. There it was again, a sound, faint, sharp, human. A whimper. He rounded the side of the cabin. Moonlight spilled over the clearing, silvering the bucket rope, the dry grass, the weathered stones of the well. And there, crumpled at its base, was a body. It stirred. A hand shifted. Wyatt's instincts surged, the old soldier's twitch, and he raised the gun. Then he saw her face. It wasn't the dirt or the blood, not the torn wrap slipping from one shoulder or the ankle swollen beneath a moccasin strap. It was her eyes, dark, wild, unbroken. Even through pain they burned. She was young, 20 maybe, with skin the color of polished bronze, long black hair tangled with burrs, a cheek streaked with dried blood. She looked like she'd been born of the desert itself, too wild to belong to any man, too beautiful to be real. "You alive?" Wyatt asked, voice low and graveled from disuse. She blinked, but didn't speak, only reached for her ankle. Boone stood at Wyatt's side, tail low, head tilted, watching her. "Easy now," Wyatt murmured. She studied him for a long beat, then gave the smallest nod. He bent, slid one arm under her knees and another behind her shoulders, and lifted. She weighed less than he'd expected, bone, muscle, and fire stitched together by grit. Back in the cabin, he set her on the cot near the stove, tossed a blanket over her, poured water into a tin cup. She drank in trembling sips, fingers shaking as if they hadn't touched kindness in weeks. He cleaned the worst cuts, careful not to press too hard on the ankle. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just kept those burning eyes on him. He gave her jerky and a biscuit. She ate in silence. He should have sent her away. Should have asked who she was, where she'd come from, who might be chasing her. But he didn't. Something about her didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like a storm, the kind that comes once in 10 years, tearing your roof clean off, just to show you the stars again. And deep down, though, he'd never admit it, part of him wanted to see those stars, even if it killed him. If stories like this resonate with you, Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Drama and join us in the heart of the Wild West. The first thing Wyatt heard was not the crackle of fire. It was her voice, low, sharp like a warning, whispered in a language he didn't know. Then silence. When he stepped closer, she lay still, eyes closed, but the air between them was charged like a rattler coiled just out of sight. But that wasn't where the story began. The cabin smelled of smoke and moonwood, and beneath it now, something else, lavender, faint and earthy. Wyatt hadn't lit the lamp. He preferred firelight. It kept the shadows deep and the secrets deeper. She lay on the cot like a wounded doe, muscles taut even in sleep, breath shallow. The blanket had slipped halfway, revealing the cut along her thigh. The sight was brief, just enough to know it needed tending. He poured warm water into a tin basin, grabbed a fresh cloth, and knelt beside her. The water steamed, carrying the scent of metal and ash. His hands, scarred from years of rope and rifle, lifted her leg gently, bracing her knee. The wound wasn't deep, but the dirt was stubborn, ground into her skin like it belonged there. Her eyes snapped open, dark, wild, searching. A hand twitched toward her side, reaching for a knife that wasn't there. Wyatt didn't move. As he murmured the word, barely touching the air. "You're safe, for now, for now." She watched him, breath sharp, before her gaze dropped to the cloth in his hand. Slowly the tension bled from her shoulders, but those eyes never left his face. He dabbed the wound, water running pink down her leg. Every movement was careful, deliberate, like handling something that could shatter if touched wrong. When he finished, he stood. "Food'll be ready soon." No answer. Only the fire's soft pop, and her stare holding him, like a question he didn't dare ask. That night, he cooked rabbit stew, the scent of meat and beans thick in the air. He served her first. She studied the spoon as if weighing whether to trust it. He waited until she ate, slow, precise, before taking his own bite. Later, as the flames burned low, he asked, "Got a name?" A pause. The fire danced in her eyes, then with a voice like something pulled from the earth itself, "Sayani." It wasn't a whisper. It was a word made of earth and bone, like it had walked through fire to reach him. Wyatt nodded once. "I'm Wyatt." No reply. Just the pop of sap in the fire, and the long breath of wind pressing against the window pane. Sayani. He rolled the name around in his mind. It sounded like something ancient, something that didn't belong in this half-burned cabin, with a man like him. By morning, she was already at the hearth, feeding the fire, hair loosely braided, moving with the quiet certainty of someone who had lived in silence long before meeting him. She found his old pouch of dried herbs, lavender, sage, and something he didn't recognize, grinding them in a clay bowl. "What's that?" he asked. "For swelling," she replied, not looking up. She limped outside later, wrapped in his old coat, gathering leaves near the creek. Wyatt followed from a distance. She stopped by a patch of wild mint, kneeling despite the pain. And for the first time he saw it, a small private smile, not meant for him, but for the earth itself. That night, the wind carried another sound. Soft at first, then clearer, a single name breathed in sleep, heavy with grief. Chaska. Wyatt sat up, heart tightening. Sayani tossed in her cot, gripping the blanket, like it might keep her from drowning. She whispered it again, softer, almost broken. The name hung in the dark like a fuse lit and waiting. And Wyatt knew when it burned down, everything would change. Morning sun carved long shadows across the Panhandle plains. Wyatt had just finished feeding Midnight and was checking the western fence line when he saw them down the dusty road, 5 riders, not locals, wearing leather coats and wide-brimmed hats, silhouettes cut sharp against the glazing horizon. He recognized Lucas Finch first, though Wyatt had met him only once. The man's gaze was too hard, too calculating. With him rode 3 others, hired hands of ill intent, rumor whispered. And behind them, On a splintered board nailed to a post hung a weathered poster, "Wanted Comanche woman, escaped from transport." Dangerous. Wyatt's gut tightened. He turned back to town where Sheriff Kelton held court like a judge and jury. Finch and crew dismounted, paper in hand. Wyatt stayed back, chest thick with unease. He didn't want her taken. But who was she? A wild threat, or the girl he'd heard breathe his name in the dark? He left before the discussion turned sour, his reputation intact, but his curiosity aflame. Back at the ranch, Boone paced near the cabin, alert to every whisper of wind. Wyatt stepped inside. Sayani wasn't there. He called lightly. Sayani, no answer. His heart dipped like a stone. He followed a faint mark, small footprints on the dusty porch. She'd left a clue. Wyatt swallowed his rising panic and grabbed a coat, stepping out into the shimmering heat. Across the yard he found her no more. Her footprints led toward the rocky creek lip, beyond the corral. His pace quickened. Around the bend he saw her again, limping down a washed-out draw, shadows clinging to her, like old grief. Wyatt pushed forward. Just as he cleared the shelter of the trees, he heard it, a hiss low and sonorous. His heart lurched. Beneath her boot, coiled in warning, was a rattlesnake, 3 feet of scales and venom ready. She froze, eyes wide. Send to warn. But the beast struck. Boone jumped, tearing into the snake. The dog bit down on its body. Snake rattled one last time, then went still. Sayani stumbled, chest pounding. Wyatt dashed forward, grabbed her elbow. "God damn it," he growled, dragging her away from the dead snake. "What are you doing out here?" She pressed a hand to Boone, checking him for blood. Boone shook off bits of earth, still growling softly. She looked up at Wyatt. Her eyes caught the land, fear and defiance tangled together in them. "I thought I could help," she said, voice low and shaky. Rattler came out of nowhere. Wyatt exhaled, chest tight. He had wanted to ask why she left, but all the worry coiled into something else. Relief that she was alive. Back at the porch, he rooted out a bottle of tincture, cleaned her ankle, bandaged it tight with cloth, gentle but firm. She sat on the steps, Boone at her side, panting. Wyatt stood above her, silent. Dust drifted from the horizon. The riders had halted near town, discussions still echoing behind wall of law. He'd have to deal with them. But not now. His gaze dropped to her, young, beautiful, wounded, and so defiantly alive. He knelt. "You shouldn't wander off," he said, voice softer than usual. She looked away, then back, steady. "I know," she replied. He nodded, resigned. Inside, he fetched warm water and dried clothes, mutely handed them across. She changed slowly, the flicker of fireplace light, catching her silhouette, proud shoulders, slender neck, steady breath. She didn't ask questions about town or about the riders. She only accepted the clothes. Outside, Boone lay at their feet, eyelids drooping. Wyatt watched the ski darken to purple. The air smelled of dust and distant mesquite blossom. He felt something unfamiliar, fear for another human soul. Thinking back to years of solitude, he realized this was new territory. His land was safe, his rules known. But now, this strange woman had unsettled everything. When he returned indoors, she had settled quietly by the hearth, water in hand. No words were necessary. But Wyatt's mind was racing. Images of Lucas Finch, showing the poster in the sheriff's office, of Sayani, slipping out, of Boone fighting for her, of her breathing his name at night. Each one a drumbeat echoing in his chest. He poured a small measure of whiskey into 2 tin cups and set them on the table. Sayani looked up. "Drink," he offered, voice steady. She took the cup. The firelight danced in her eyes, tired, grateful, fierce. They sat in silence, dust shifting beneath the floorboards. Out in the black, the wind rose, lashing at the cabin. But inside was warmth. And for the first time in years, Wyatt let himself feel its glow. And though the danger was not past, he knew one truth: he would not let her walk into darkness without him. The wind had changed. Wyatt could feel it in his bones the way old men feel storms before the clouds. Something was coming. It wasn't just Finch or the poster, or the uneasy silence that had hung like smoke since Sayani returned to the ranch. It was something deeper, something brewing between them. That evening, he found her sitting by the creek, feet bare in the cold water, arms wrapped around her knees. The light was soft gold bleeding into dusk. Her hair was down wild and still damp from where she'd rinsed it. She didn't look up as he approached, only said, "I know what's coming." Wyatt sat a few feet away, elbows resting on his knees, eyes on the water. "So do I." For a moment, nothing moved but the current. Then she said, barely louder than the wind, "You want to know why they're hunting me?" He didn't answer. "Not yet. They think I'm part of what happened out near Blanco Ridge," she continued. "The ambush. The patrol that was attacked." Wyatt's spine straightened. That was years ago. That was the day Clara died. He remembered the dust, the smell of blood and gunpowder, the smoke still curling from the ridge when he found her body. He'd heard the stories: Comanche raiders, a surprise attack. The army blamed it on a group led by a warrior named Chaska. And now, Sayani, this woman who had slept under his roof, who had healed under his hands, was tying herself to it. His breath slowed. "I didn't kill anyone," she said, finally looking at him. "I didn't even know Chaska was planning it." Chaska. Wyatt repeated the name, dry on his tongue. She nodded. "My brother." Silence stretched long between them. Sayani stared at the water. "I tried to stop him. He said it was justice that the soldiers had raided our winter camp the year before, that it was time to answer back." Wyatt said nothing. The fear in his chest was old, but it flared like dry mesquite in summer. "I fought him," she whispered. "He hit me, knocked me out before I could warn anyone. When I woke up, it was already over. The smoke, the bodies." Her voice broke. I ran. I ran from what he did, from what I couldn't stop. But the army found me. They didn't ask questions, just threw me in the wagon like all the others." Wyatt stared at the water, fists clenched in the dirt. He remembered Clara's hands, the way she laughed when she tied her hair up, the letters she never finished writing, the bullet wound in her back. He remembered building her coffin alone. And now, the sister of the man responsible was sitting beside him, weeping into the wind. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sayani said, "or believe me. But I needed to tell you." Wyatt looked at her. He didn't see a killer. He saw the tremble in her shoulders, the shame in her voice, the weight of guilt she carried for a crime she didn't commit. But his heart was a battlefield. "I spent years wanting to kill the man who led that ambush," he said, voice hoarse. "I dreamed about it. Every night." Sayani didn't move. Wyatt looked away. "And now his blood sits beside me. And all I can feel is—" He stopped, because the word was too dangerous. But it was there. Love. Not loud or sudden or reckless, but quiet, slow, like a seed that had survived drought and somehow found rain. Sayani wiped her face, hands trembling. "I never meant to bring pain here," she said. "I just wanted to survive." He nodded slowly. "I know." They sat like that as the sun sank. Two people caught between what was and what might be. A cowboy and a fugitive. A man haunted by loss. A woman shackled to the past. And the truth, the hard burning truth, sat between them, silent and alive. But Wyatt didn't walk away. He stayed. Because for the first time he saw more than bloodlines and blame. He saw her. And that changed everything. The horizon was stained with dust. Wyatt stood on the porch, coffee cooling in his hand, his eyes fixed on the wavering shapes cutting through the morning haze. 4 riders, slow, deliberate, a storm moving on legs and hooves. He didn't need to ask who they were. Lucas Finch rode at the front, dark coat whipping in the wind, hat pulled low, mouth a tight line of certainty. The men behind him were rough-edged Syard, the kind who didn't need names to be feared. Behind Wyatt, the door creaked. Sayani stepped out quietly, her shadow merging with his. She'd braided her hair tight today, wore the old coat he'd given her. Her eyes didn't blink as she looked at the riders drawing closer. "They're here," she said, voice steady. Wyatt nodded, jaw tight. "I know." He placed the coffee cup down and stepped inside. Picked up his rifle. Checked the chamber. Loaded each bullet with the same care he might have once given to a prayer. Outside, Boone paced along the steps, ears flat, growling low. The riders halted 10 paces from the porch. Dust swirled around their boots. Finch dismounted slowly, fingers resting on his belt where the revolver waited like a promise. "Wyatt Carver," he called out. Wyatt didn't answer, just stepped forward, rifle loose in his hands, feet firm on the wooden planks. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," Finch continued, lifting a folded paper. "She's wanted by the United States Army. Escaped custody. Dangerous." Sayani didn't flinch. Behind the riders, another horse approached. Sheriff Kelton. Wyatt felt a bitter twist in his gut. The sheriff reined in beside Finch. His uniform looked older, tighter than it once did. Eyes tired, but his hand still rested near his holster. "Wyatt," Kelton called. "Let's make this easy." Wyatt stepped down from the porch, boots crunching dry soil. "She ain't dangerous," he said. "You know that." Kelton shifted in the saddle. "Doesn't matter what I know. She's named in the reports. Reports lie." Finch laughed. "She's Comanche. That's all some people need." Wyatt's eyes narrowed. The silence that followed was heavy, like the calm before a gunfight in an empty street. And then a wagon creaked in from the east road. Old Maybelle. She sat hunched over the reins, bonnet, lopsided dress, faded to the color of ash. The mule pulling her wagon snorted, stubborn as the woman behind it. "What the hell's this?" Finch muttered. Maybelle climbed down, feet planting firm in the dust. "I have something to say," she called out, voice thin but unwavering. "Last winter, when my grandson wandered off during the storm, we thought he was dead. The snow came in hard. Wolves were near. But he came back, carried, covered in furs and barely breathing. Said an Indian woman pulled him from the river." She looked at Sayani. That woman was her. Murmurs rippled through the riders. Kelton looked away. Finch's expression didn't change. "Still doesn't change the order," he said. He took a step toward the porch. Boone barked, loud. Warning. Finch kept walking. "Last chance, Carver," he said, reaching for his gun. Wyatt raised his rifle, fast, firm, but didn't fire. Then Finch's hand jerked, and in that instant, Boone leapt. The dog lunged for Finch's arm, teeth sinking in deep. Finch shouted, stumbled, and fired. The shot echoed like a thunderclap across the dry earth. Boone yelped, then went still. Sayani screamed. Wyatt's world narrowed. He saw Finch's face, the smoke curling from his pistol, Boone's still body in the dust. And something inside Wyatt snapped. He fired once, not to kill but close. The shot struck the ground inches from Finch's boot, kicking up dust and rock. The man flinched, stepped back. Wyatt stepped forward. "Next one won't miss." Finch looked at him, blood on his sleeve where Boone had bitten. "You'd kill for her." Wyatt didn't blink. "I'd kill you for less." The other riders shifted, hands hovered near holsters. Sayani stepped down from the porch, voice shaking. "Stop, please." She moved past Wyatt toward the group. "I'll go. Don't shoot anyone else." No more blood. Wyatt grabbed her wrist. No, he said. You don't get to walk away like this. They'll kill you. They can try. Finch raised his gun again. Wyatt stepped between them. One man, one rifle, against four. Then Kelton raised a hand. That's enough, the sheriff barked. Everyone froze. Kelton looked at Sayani, then at Wyatt. You believe her? He asked. Wyatt nodded. Kelton sighed, shoulders sagging. She stays, he said quietly. Finch turned. What I said, she stays. The army's orders are thin. No witness saw her with the raiders. You shoot her here, and I won't protect you. Finch's jaw clenched. Then he turned, spit in the dirt, and mounted. This ain't over, he snarled. They rode off, hooves pounding like war drums retreating. Wyatt dropped his rifle, ran to Boone. The old dog lay still. Wyatt knelt, fingers trembling, as he stroked Boone's fur still warm. Sayani knelt beside him, her hand over his. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. In that moment, surrounded by blood dust and silence, Wyatt realized the truth. He had lost many things in his life, but he would not lose her. The next morning, the ranch was silent. No riders on the horizon. No boots in the dirt. Just the wind again, returning like it always did after trouble left, moving through the mesquite, and the bones of things lost. Sheriff Kelton stayed behind after the others rode out. He lingered near the fence, watching the sunrise, with the kind of weariness that only came from too many years watching good things break. Wyatt didn't speak. He didn't thank him. He just stood beside him, both men staring at the distance like it held the answer to something neither of them could name. She saved that boy, Kelton finally said. That ought to mean something. Wyatt nodded. Kelton rubbed his jaw. You sure about her, I'm sure, Wyatt said. Another pause. Then the sheriff sighed. No one's heard anything official from Fort Lincoln in weeks. Papers are old. Orders even older. No one's gonna chase this further. Not unless someone makes them. He looked at Wyatt long and quiet. I'm not that man, he said. And with that he turned his horse and left the dust rising behind him, already beginning to settle. Finch didn't return. Whether it was the bullet near his boot or the fire in Wyatt's eyes, he knew he'd met a line he didn't want to cross again. The kind of man who didn't bluff. The kind of land that buried secrets deep. Wyatt never spoke his name again. The grave was small near the cottonwood. Wyatt dug it himself the way he had for Clara. The ground was hard and dry, reluctant to take more sorrow. But he did it anyway. Boone deserved that much. Sayani stood beside him the whole time. No words, just tears that glistened in the dust falling silently onto fur that would never rise again. Wyatt placed the collar on the stone and sawed back, breathing hard. He died like he lived, he said, voice gravel in his throat. Loyal. Brave. Too good for this place. Sayani knelt beside him, taking his hand. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. From that day, the ranch changed. Not all at once. The land was still dry, the nights still long. But something shifted subtle, like the way light changes before rain. Sayani stayed. She moved through the cabin with quiet confidence, planting herbs behind the shed, mending blankets, brushing the horses with care. She never asked Wyatt to explain himself, never questioned his toilets. She just existed beside him, and somehow that was enough. He taught her to shoot not for violence, but for protection. She taught him to listen to the birds, the wind, the stillness before a storm. They shared coffee in the mornings and stew at night, sometimes speaking, sometimes not. Love, Wyatt learned, didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just grew like roots under dry soil, waiting for a crack to bloom. One morning, while tending to the fence line, he found her near the gate, hands folded over her stomach. Her face was calm. Her eyes held something new. I need to tell you something, she said. He set down his tools. She stepped closer, took his hand, placed it gently against her belly. He froze, then looked at her. You sure? He asked. She smiled, soft and wild. I am. For a long moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Then she said, I was thinking, if it's a boy, I'd like to name him Boone. The name hit him like thunder, not loud, but deep, vibrating through every scar he carried. He didn't cry. He just pulled her into his arms and held her forehead against hers, wind curling around them like a blessing. Months passed. The ranch bloomed in its own way, not with roses or rain, but with peace, with routine, with laughter that crept in slowly and stayed longer each time. Wyatt built a second room onto the cabin, painted the old door. Sayani hung dried herbs from the rafters, their scent warm and grounding. They made a crib together from cedar wood. And when the baby kicked, Wyatt pressed his ear to her belly, eyes wide with wonder. The desert didn't soften. It never would. But now there was a garden behind the cabin. There were fresh hoofprints from a foal born in spring. There were nights when Sayani sang old songs in a language he didn't understand, but listened to anyway. Wyatt Carver, a man hollowed by grief, had found something he never expected to hold again, a reason to stay, a reason to wake up, a reason to believe. And all of it began with a girl in the dust, a whisper in the dark, and the courage to listen. In the Old West, folks liked to talk about gunslingers and riders chasing right and wrong across dust trails. But some stories don't end with a shootout. They end in wind and silence, in a man who didn't say much, and a woman who stepped out of pain, carrying something no one expected: life. I'm telling you this, not to speak of love, but to remind you that even in the driest soil, if a heart can still ache, then someday that land will bloom again.